Okay, folks, welcome tonight to our midweek Bible study. Glad you're here. It's been a very nice day, and especially if you're a sports fan. Tennessee just won their game, which means that they will be in the College World Series championship. And I feel sorry for their coach. It said that Tony won an additional $110,000, I think, for them making the World Series, and he'll get a $140,000 bonus if they win it. A measly $250,000. Bless his heart. We want to put him on our Lyft program and take him some groceries, I think. It's been a beautiful day, and I'm glad you're here at the close of it so we can enter our study together. Our good friend Jeff just announced that he was 62 this last week.
Coming up Saturday.
Oh, Saturday, 62. And I told him that I was 62 2 or 3 times, I think. It's hard for me to remember, but I think I had multiple 62 years old there. So congratulations. Now, the only sad part about that is that may mean working towards retiring, and I don't know what that carries with it, so we'll talk first, okay, before you do that. I think everybody's in now. Let's bow and have a prayer together. Father, we are grateful for this beautiful day, for the weather that has been warm. We thank you that we are able in the evening now to come into a building that provides comfort for us, and we can open up our minds and open up the Bible and study. As we look at this second chapter of John, we pray that we may do so with open minds, receptive minds, looking for things that would help us as we live our lives for you. We thank you for each person who's here. Ask that your blessings be upon those who are not here because of illness or some other problem. This we pray through Jesus. Amen. If you don't have a copy of the questions for tonight, this is chapter 2, verses 1 through 11, the wedding at Cana of Galilee. And I'll be glad to provide a copy of the questions for you. Okay, we've got a couple back there. John, can we get a little help here maybe in doing this? Anybody else? I know you're going to do it. Okay. Anybody else? There are 2 ladies back here. Mary needs some. You want more, just in case. You have the lovely blue stripe down it. And we are on question number 10. We talked about the fact that last week that the Greek word for wine here is oinos, which is a generic term. It doesn't tell us whether the juice of the grape was fermented or not. If you look at an English dictionary, it will say something about wine that it is fermented. But the Greek dictionary will not tell you that. I hold the position that if it was high octane, as we sometimes say, that Jesus was certainly not sinless in that he provided 150 gallons of wine, which would be quite a big drinking party, which is condemned in 1 Peter 2, and that therefore it would not have been of that nature. Now, I know there are people who disagree with that, but if he provided wine for people to get drunk, then I could scarcely see how he could be considered sinless, would have been contributing to their sin. And that brings us to a couple of other things that fit into that are often discussed in this same regard. How did the master of the feast describe the wine Jesus made, and do you see any significance in this? How did he describe it?
Save the best to last.
Save the best to last. He said that's not normally the way you do it. You give the best first, and then it decreases in quality, and people get that later. He said, you've just done it backwards. You've provided the best last. Now, do you see any significance in that other than the fact that Jesus made good wine? Do you see any significance? Yes, John?
We know about a lot of animals that were killed. We know a lot of prophets that were killed, a lot of kings that were killed, and this is the best now.
Yes. Yeah. Good point. Anything else? Who was the master of the feast? What was his job? Do you know?
Say keep people fed and drink, I guess.
That's exactly right. He was responsible for the physical matters relating to the wedding. He was to make sure that the people had a place to go, a place to sit, food to eat, wine to drink, or whatever the beverage was. And so the wine was brought to him. Now, was he able to determine that the best was saved for the last? Which would mean what?
His palate was clean.
His palate was clean. If he had been involved in some kind of a drinking splurge up to that point, I doubt. Now, I'm only going on what others tell me. I've never been drunk in my life, and I don't know such things, but I guess that if you drink a little or if you drink enough, you don't know whether what you're drinking is of good quality or bad quality. It goes down and gives you some kind of reaction that you're looking for. His palate was able still to determine that this wine was better, was good, which would make me think that he had not been on a drinking jag of some kind. Remember, they had run out of the original wine. And this had been brought in after the wedding feast was in full swing. I don't know what day. The wedding feast usually lasted a week. So I don't know what day this was, but they had run out of wine. And here's additional wine that he is determining is the best. So he was still able to think, to taste, and to understand that it was the best. Okay? And then somebody says, yes, but you've got this phrase in chapter 2 and verse 10 that says they were well drunk. So there you have it. They were drunk because 2:10 says they were well drunk. What does well drunk mean? Yeah, they were satiated. I like that word. Don't ask me to spell it, but I like it, satiated. When I worked at the prison, we were the receiving center for everybody who was sentenced to prison time in the state of West Virginia. We were the receiving center. And we gave all kinds of tests and did all kinds of interviews. And when the doctor would write down his comments, and I would read that on that because I got it after he had already written down his, it would say they were well nourished. What did that mean? They just had food to eat. They were not emaciated. They were not underfed. They were not grossly overfed. They just were well fed. I would think that well drunk means the same thing. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just curious, the ESV actually has that worded differently.
What does it say?
It says everyone serves the good wine first, and And when people have drunk freely,
freely.
then the poor line.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't really say, never. It just sounds like that they have.
Yes, this says when they were well drunk. Means I think the same thing. I don't think there's a nickel's worth of difference there. Is that they had been drinking all along. And so they had had something to drink. And they were satiated. And I don't think this is any kind of argument for the fact that they were drunk. Just because in our New King James Version and the King James Version has the word drunk in there, and we jump on that and try to make more out of it, I think, than can be made. Questions, comments? Surely this has raised some kind of comment or questions. I would be glad to. Yes.
I always thought about this story.
Okay.
John gives a lot of details. When he describes, he gives all these details. These waterfalls were for purification purposes. We don't know what the water in those pots looked like when they added more water to them. But if they were like a rag to wash people's feet, put in there, rag, put in there, it's probably kind of stony water.
I don't know.
And they just filled it up with more water. That's
Yeah.
where that clean. And I think John would give those details. But if he took that water and made pure wine, it's kind of a symbolism of what the Savior can do. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just speculation.
I think it shows, and we asked back at the beginning what each one of the parables showed the Lord's power over, and this one was quality, if you remember, that whatever else could be done, he could do it better, the quality of his. And however that was made, there's all kinds of questions about exactly how did that happen, and somebody has pointed out that he made wine just like everybody else does, water turned to wine, except he did it quicker. If you take the normal way that grapes are growing and moisture is used, and so he did it instantaneously. He did it miraculously instead of sending them through a growing cycle and having them squeezed and wine made. Does this miracle, in your opinion, condone social drinking? Why or why not? Consider the following verses, and I give you a whole bunch of verses. I hope you read them in formulating your answer. Do you think that this miracle in any way condones social drinking?
So many places in the Bible that says, do not drink. Don't stare at the wine when it's sparkling. Don't do this. Don't do that with the wine. Then it bites like a viper. So how could you take all of those and just take this one and go, yep, they were drinking?
Wine is never presented in a positive way as a beverage, if we know anything about its alcoholic content in the New Testament, or in the Old Testament, as a matter of fact. Don't look on the wine while it's sparkling in the cup. It stings like an adder. There's just thing after thing that says that's not what you ought to be involved in. Now, let's enter another matter into the equation. If you read 1 Timothy 5:23, what was Timothy told? Drink a little wine for your stomach's sake. I would guess that most of the people that I know who drink wine don't do it for their stomach's sake. As a medicine, I would think there is nothing wrong with medicine that would have alcoholic content. If you've taken many cough suppressants, you're probably going to find that there is an alcohol content in there. When I was a teenager and delivering prescriptions for the local pharmacist, his drugstore, we sold terpene hydrate and codeine over the counter. And I will tell you that sometimes a fellow would come in, the town wino, and he would buy a couple of those and have them down before he got out the door. Now you can't do that and get them that way. But I don't think he was drinking them for his body's sake, for his stomach's sake, or any other sake other than it made him high. So I don't have any problem with alcohol used as a medication. As a matter of fact, I take some narcotics for the pain that I live with. Some of the rest of you live with constant pain, and I am one of those. And so I take narcotics. I certainly don't take them for any pleasure. I take them so I can get out of bed and walk in the morning, and that I don't have to lie in bed and toss and turn all night because of the pain that I'm in. I take them because the doctor prescribes them. I take them only as he prescribes them, and not in any other way or for any other reason. So let's not compare apples and oranges here. I'm not talking about alcohol that may be used as a medicine. I'm talking about alcohol for strictly personal pleasure and taking. Now, somebody says, are you saying, Tom Miller, that the person who drinks a glass of wine is going to hell? I am not. I'm not saying that at all. I will let God handle that one of how much he will allow. What I am saying is there's no reason to do it. Let me read something to you. Now, generally, when we preachers read something, it's because some other preacher has written it and we think he really has a point. This is a memo from the World Health Organization. And I want to tell you their conclusion. The World Health Organization has now published a statement in the Lancet Public Health. When it comes to alcohol consumption, there is no safe amount that does not affect health. That's a rather new approach by the World Health Association. We cannot talk about a so-called safe level of alcohol use. It doesn't matter how much you drink. The risk to the drinker's health starts from the first drop of any alcoholic beverage. I didn't say that. Some preacher did in the World Health Organization. So, when we talk about possible so-called safer levels of alcohol consumption or about its protective effects, we are ignoring the bigger picture of alcohol harm in our region and in the world. Do you find that to be telling? And you can Google that. Simply look up World Health Organization and their latest memo on alcohol consumption. They say there is no safe level. I commented one time that I don't know how it happened, that I have this link now and I get pictures all the time of snakes. And it asked, what kind of a snake is this? Some of you are going like this, like you get it too. Yeah, it keeps coming up. Would you like to have more or less of these? And I put less every time, but it never works. And so you say, well, is that a cottonmouth or is it a rattlesnake? I figure if it's got rattles on the tail, that's a dead giveaway. Is it a copperhead? You know, what is it? And I can tell you how never to get bitten by a venomous snake. Surefire. Don't ever go where one is. It works every single time. I'll have to tell you that when I was in college, one of our professors was an amateur herpetologist. Means he took care of snakes. He had some of them in his room in the lab, and one of them was a cottonmouth. And he said, Tom, I'm going to be gone for a little while. Do you mind feeding the snakes for me? And I said, sure, Doc, don't mind it at all. He said, now, if you go down here, you'll catch some of these little tadpoles or these little frogs, and the water moccasin loves those. I said, oh, good for him, that's great. So I caught one of those, and I went over and I unlocked the cage, kept it locked up. I took the snake hook, and I pinned the cottonmouth against the back of the wall, and I put the frog in. Now, the only thing wrong with that whole scenario was that he struck at the frog, which I was holding in my hand. And I got enough of the snake hooked on him that he didn't quite make it across the cage. I shut the door, locked it, said, you can starve to death for all I care, because I'm not going to do that anymore. I placed myself at risk. I understand that there are some people who drink casually and seldom. But also know that people who have a drinking problem started out that way. I don't think people start out saying, I'm going to be an alcoholic, watch me go. I don't think it starts that way at all. I think it starts with that little bit, that social kind of drinking a little bit more. And I can handle this now. I've got it all under control and a little bit more, but I can still work. And then it's like the old saying is that the man takes a drink, and the drink takes a drink, and the drink takes the man. And some of us in here have seen that happen with people that we know and love. I don't know why we'd want to play that dangerous game. I don't know why we would want to play that dangerous game at all. So my recommendation is don't start. Period. End of story. And although I have some vices, that's not one of them, and I'm thankful for that, because I've seen what it does to too many people. Now, that's the end of sermonette, okay? We're not going to have an invitation song, but just jump right in, sister.
I was just going to share something that Tim Shoulders told us when he talked about this. He said that, and it was a very important topic to him because his father was an alcoholic.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, he said that 1 out of every 10 people who ever takes a drink becomes an alcoholic.
Wow.
And he said, that might not sound good, but if you were going to take a plane ride, would you choose an airline that 1 out of every 10 planes crashed? It's kind of the same thing.
I said, Steve, most pilots are alcoholics.
I don't know.
I'm just saying, statistically they are.
That's a telling thing, that puts it in some perspective. Anybody else? Feel free to jump in. I don't
I
mind.
think, Tom, we're all wired different. In my life, I know I have a family history of people being addicted to
Yes.
things. And I think what one person could maybe do in a one-off situation, the other person might not be able to do. And I think you have to look at your family history of knowing that, hey, I've got this predisposition to be an abuser.
And that's a good point. That's a good point. That it does tend to run in families. I wish it did not, but it tends to run in families. Mm-hmm.
That's how I find out that my name was in the Bible.
Say it again.
That's how I found out that my name was in the Bible. A wino told me. California, in the 60s, there was one everywhere. And there were good people. They never harmed nobody. We used to go talk to them. And I told him my name. He said, my name is in the Bible.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I was in a home with one of my relatives, I'm not going to tell you which one, doesn't matter, and he was drinking, and he said, "This is the best that money can buy." He said, "It's absolutely great. It's delicious." I said, "Let me smell it." So I smelled it. And I told him, in my opinion, what it smelled like, which is neither here nor there. And he said, "Well, I'll admit, you have to cultivate a taste for it." I'm thinking, like, I don't really want to. Why would you take something that you have to cultivate a taste for? Like, what does that mean?
You know, just about every medicine label that you read saying, it tells you all the things that it can do to you, but it ends up, you know, just like when a doctor tells some people to drink wine or something.
Yes.
It tells you, well, the doctor has decided that this is better than
Yeah.
the result
Yeah.
of doing that. You know, everything we take outside of the body is probably not good for the body unless it's the food and the water that God created. You know, so I think that that's, I know what we're talking about, but, you know, the medicines we take are the same way.
Yeah. When my son was just a toddler and had croup, some babies have really bad taste of croup, and he did. And the doctor said, Mrs. Miller said, I can write you a prescription, but I can give you a recipe that is far better than the prescription. And I know that your husband's a preacher, so I don't know how you feel about this. And she came home and she said, it is whiskey and lemon juice and I think Hard Rock candy, if I'm not mistaken, or honey. And she said, what do we do, Tom? I said, well, I cannot go to the state store here. Everybody in this little town knows me, and that's going to be a hard one to pull off. And she said, but our neighbor will go for me. I said, so he came up to the door, rang the doorbell, and I answered the door, and there he was. He was an insurance salesman, very successful. And he kind of took it out of his pocket, went like this, and handed it off. And we used that, and Jeff got better. And I cannot account for the fact that he went around going for days thereafter. What was the significance of this miracle according to 2:11? It caused the people to believe because it demonstrated his great power. His glory was shown, and it strengthened the faith of the disciples. You don't pull something off like that if you're just an ordinary guy. You know, we've seen magicians who do sleight of hand, but it's kind of hard to do sleight of hand with what he was working with in chapter 2. So it was along that line of helping people. And the reason I put that question on your page is remember the purpose statement of John in chapter 20, verses 30 and 31. Many other signs truly did Jesus in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you might have life through his name. What's the purpose of the miracles? To create faith in Jesus. Are they working here? Yeah, they are. They're working right here in this very first miracle that he performed. Okay? Questions, comments, observations, personal testimonies?
Do you think the next verse it talks about now his mother and brothers, I guess basically were with him. We know his brothers didn't believe in Jesus.
Yes.
So do you think everybody didn't know that he performed this, or?
I think the thing there, Rusty, in my opinion, was that was their brother. It's hard to see that in people that you played with, that you were in the same house with. And they had a hard time accepting the fact that this was a special guy. And I think that their lack of faith was just in. He said, as a matter of fact, the prophet is not without honor except in his own country. And I've seen that happen. That a local congregation will have one opinion of a preacher, and he's old whoever. We've had him for a long time. And elsewhere they may be saying, "Wow, he preaches for you? That's something." Because we look at things differently. When we are intimate with something or somebody, we tend not to see all that somebody else sees. And I think his disciples just didn't catch on. I mean, his brothers just didn't catch on. They were blinded by the fact that this was the guy that they played in the dirt with. Anybody else? Okay. I do have new study sheets for you tonight. And these have no beautiful stripes on them. They are all pristine. Here comes a helper for you.
I misspoke a moment ago.
Thank you, sir.
It just dawned on me what I said.
Say it again.
I misspoke a moment ago, and it just dawned on me what I said. I said that Tim Shoulders was passionate about alcoholism because his father was an alcoholic. That is not true. His father was killed by a drunk driver.
Okay.
An alcoholic.
Yeah. That would make you have real strong feelings about it, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Indeed. This covers verses 12 through 23 of chapter 2 and has to do with Jesus' appearance at Jerusalem, and also has one of the really great events in the life of Jesus that people remember, and that is the cleansing of the temple. And we'll have, I'm sure, good things to say about that, interesting things. I hope you've noticed that I've gotten a whole new desk here, and it has a little tray right here for a sandwich and something, soft drink or a cup of coffee. I never. That sounds like a good idea to me, Rusty. I don't know, though, after knowing what Jesus felt about the money changers, maybe we better forget that one.
Yeah, he threw him out of the temple. No idea that.
Seeing chapter 2 and verse 12 as a transition verse, what does it tell us about Jesus and his disciples? And I mean transition, we're going from one event to another event. What does it tell us about Jesus?
And he was busy.
He was busy.
He was calling the Jewish cousins.
Okay. Anybody else?
So what happened there?
I think there's just several interesting things here encapsulated in this one verse. It seems that he, his family, and his disciples all moved to Capernaum. We think of Jesus living in Nazareth. Well, he grew up there, but as an adult, his family moved to Capernaum, which was a fishing village on the northern slope of the Sea of Galilee. And it was small, and it was a place where most everybody would have known everybody. It's thought to be the hometown of Matthew. And it was not far from Bethsaida, where Peter, Andrew, James, and John were from. So it was in that area where some of his apostles were from. This is also the last time that we hear about his mother until the cross. She is present at the cross, and he turns the care of her over to his beloved John. And his brothers are mentioned here without being named. It just says brothers. So it seems to me there are several things wrapped up in this verse that moves us along in the storyline. That they moved to Capernaum, that it was a small village on the northern slope of the Sea of Galilee, that some of his apostles were from there or close to there, and Mary we hear about here, but not for chapters until we get to the cross. And his brothers are mentioned, but not by name. A lot of stuff in one little verse.
Hey, Tom, I read the commentary on that verse. It says Jesus shared his church friends with his family, being his disciples. So they all kind of, they were all intermingled.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, is that his followers, his disciples, had relationship with his family and vice versa. Good point. What number is this event in Jesus' period of consideration? 4, that's right, number 4. Somebody held up 4 fingers over here, so I got the message. Either that means a fastball or it means 4. And if you were taking this course to me at the School of Preaching, you would need to know all of those for the final, just telling you. The first one had been the consideration of John the Baptist, what John thought of him. The second one had been what John's disciples thought of him. And then the third one was what those present at the marriage feast thought of him, and now what those at Jerusalem think of him. So he is put out for consideration by various people. What seems to be the reason that Jesus went to Jerusalem? Passover, Feast of the Passover. Now, here's something that's very interesting. We found out from verse 12 that he and his family and disciples moved to Capernaum. And now we have him going to Jerusalem, is where the Feast of the Passover was held. You know how far that was? 85 miles. What does that tell you about Jewish men who went to the feasts that were held in Jerusalem? They were dedicated in going. They went whatever distance was necessary, if at all possible, to get there. And so he makes the trek all the way through Galilee, down through Samaria, down into Judea to Jerusalem for this feast. But what's the significance of the Feast of Passover? What was a big deal about Passover?
It's the last plague before they left Egypt.
There were actually 3 major feasts. There were lots of feasts, but 3 major ones. We know about a couple of them very well because they were 50 days apart. Pentecost and Passover. The third one is called the Feast of Tabernacles. And that's when to remind them of when they were in the wilderness and didn't have permanent housing, that they had to build booths or tabernacles. A tabernacle means tent. And they built little booth structures, and they lived in those just to remind them that they were strangers and pilgrims, that they had not had permanent homes while in the wilderness. And so the Passover, and John is right, is that it was to remind them of when they left Egypt. The last plague of the 10 plagues was a passing over of the Lord. We sometimes say the Passover of the death angel, but it doesn't say death angel. But when the Lord passed over, and if the blood was not on the doorpost and door lintels, then the firstborn in that family died. And so to remind them of that, they had every year this feast called Passover. it was commingled with another event, the days of unleavened bread. Because the bread that they were to eat during Passover was unleavened bread. Because when the people were fleeing Egypt, they were told to prepare unleavened bread. Did you ever wonder why? Why not just bread? It'll keep longer. That's exactly right. Have you ever gone to the store and bought a loaf of bread, and the time you get it home, it's moldy already?
Or make your own bread. I mean, it doesn't take but.
Yeah, it doesn't take very long at all. Although that'll keep you from getting the flu, I don't want to eat it on it. And unleavened bread will keep longer. You know the second thing about it? Can be made more quickly. If you have bread that has yeast in it, what do you have to do? Have to break it, let it rise, beat it back down, and do all of that kind of stuff. But here, you could do unleavened bread quickly, and it would it would last longer. Here's a reason that's important. When was the Lord's Supper instituted? During Passover. During the days of unleavened bread. Does that tell you the kind of bread that they used in the Lord's Supper? Unleavened bread. Because one of the things that they were to do was purge from their house any trace of leaven. Leaven is yeast, by the way. I'm sure you know that. But just in case, that's what it is. And so that tells us that the bread they used to have the Lord's Supper, to institute the Lord's Supper, was unleavened bread. Thank you much. Appreciate it. We're out of time. And look forward to you having a good week, seeing you on the Lord's Day. Remember, pictures are going to be taken. Jamie's going to retake pictures if you're not satisfied with your last one.